Hi, Judy. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that we are also live. We are live on Zoom and also live streaming on our Facebook page, on the College of Education Facebook page. I'm Megan Hinther. I am the Manager of Communications and External Relations in the college. And today I'm joined by Dr. Judy Janssen-Spurnuck, who is a registered therapeutic counselor, a master therapeutic counselor, a PhD, an MEd, and a BEd graduate, all from USask. As well as a sessional lecturer here in the Department of Curriculum Studies. I just want to give me a second. I want to see if we are live on Facebook here. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so before we get going and before I invite Judy to talk a bit about her background, I just wanted to have those that have joined us, like, put in the chat if you're a teacher, if you're also a grad student at the college or an undergrad student, a teacher candidate. On Facebook too, you can put that in the message feed. There is a bit of a delay, so I may not get it right away. Or if you work for a school division office, kind of what's your background? Just a quick, like, one word. We just kind of want to get a feel for who's joined us today.
Yeah, that'd be great. Undergrad. Oh, cool. First year teacher. Remember that.
Gotta mute my.
Hi, Shaughnessy. I can't help myself but speak to that.
Awesome. Some current students here.
Oh, hi, Sky.
Hi, Rachel. And on Facebook, we have some teachers. Great. Okay, well, I think this is a topic that is incredibly timely and also really really applicable to teachers out in the field, for students currently completing their Bachelor of Education degree. As we've seen with COVID and the pandemic, it brought a lot of mental health in our students, in our families, in our communities, in ourselves, just to that forefront with the stresses that the school closures brought on and the lockdowns and everything that we've been living with for the last 2.5 years. So I know that teachers are really, really feeling it. Hopefully you've had some time to relax this summer and you're coming out of that, like, sleeping for a couple of weeks and sitting in your lawn chair at the lake, hopefully. But yeah, so this is why we wanted to have Judy in and share some of the work that you've been doing, Judy. So why don't you introduce yourself, talk about your background?
Sure, I can do that. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to see some familiar faces. It's nice to see that in the space when we're not in person, at least to know through the chat that there's some people there. So yeah, my name is Judy, and I'm currently a lecturer in the College of Education Curriculum Studies for the most part. And in terms of my background, of course, I come from a teaching background. I taught in K-12 in Saskatoon with Saskatoon Public Schools for close to 20 years. So started in the early 2000s, and I did leave the classroom to take the leap to finish my PhD and work here at the college just prior to the pandemic. So before that, I spent a good 10 to 12 years at King George Community School in Saskatoon, teaching mostly grade 8, but grades 6 to 8. That was my home and my family for many, many years. And then from there, I moved on to teaching at Nutana Collegiate. And from Nutana Collegiate, I worked in a separate program that was a bridge program between the Saskatchewan Health Authority and several school divisions, even though I was employed with Saskatoon Public Schools. So I worked for 10 years in that program, and it was a mental health program, day program for children and youth ages 12 to 18 who were struggling with moderate to severe mental health concerns. So if you think about the highest level of mental health care in Saskatoon being the Dubé Center, or the children's ward of the Dubé Center, then we would be the next tier down our day program. So children and youth would come to our program either from hospital or from a school, but really struggling and potentially not even in school. So the last half of my career was working with, it would have been grades 7 to 12 youth coming in and out of that program. So while I was in that program, I decided to pursue a degree or a counseling therapy certificate and degree, just because a lot of what we did in that program was counseling. And
Absolutely.
so I wanted to have the background for that. And, you know, I had already noticed in the 10 years prior at King George Community School, the time that I was spending in the classroom, I would say to my partner that, you know, about 50% of what I do is teach. And then about 40% of what I do is counsel or parent. And then about 10% of what I do is manage crisis and dispense medications and. So there was a lot that kind of brought me full circle once I landed in working in mental health, to thinking that a counseling background would really help me. And during that time, that's when I decided to also pursue a master's and look at youth struggling in school. At the time, we still referred to some of us who struggle as youth at risk. I myself fell into that category as a youth at risk, as a teen mom and a high school dropout, and just somebody struggling to find their place. And I thought after 10 years in the classroom that that would be a good group to look at and find out just what could we as teachers do to better support those of us who struggle. And yeah, that kind of rounded out my career, and then landed myself in a PhD program because I just found I couldn't stop learning about that topic and about student and teacher struggle and success, more importantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's when you and I first connected, was last year around convocation, around June 2021, to talk about your PhD research and what your dissertation was on. And I think it's so fascinating, and it's such a great area of research that needs dedicated people like you working in it. So can you talk about the human curriculum maybe, and what came out of your PhD research here at the college?
Sure. Should I go back a little bit to my Calm Classrooms piece, which
Yes.
kind of,
Oh yes, your yes, Judy has Calm Classrooms. Yes.
well, that's kind of just in between. So I had finished the master's working with students at risk. I use that term very loosely because I don't necessarily like it, but it was part of my dissertation title at the time. To thinking about teachers at risk was really the direction I was going, because, you know, as teachers in the classroom supporting students, we end up owning a lot. We can burn out. Many teachers burn out in the first 5 years. You know, the data is 30 to 50%. I don't know where it's at, and we leave the profession for many reasons. But I started thinking, you know, what is it that, you know, causes teacher burnout or could support teachers to have calm classrooms? And I did a little mini study in between my master's work and my PhD, where I looked for teachers who were challenged or facing challenges in the classroom, and tried to support them with some of what I called at the time my Calm Classrooms work. And it was more like an action research project where I kind of brought what I did in my classroom to foster calm to teachers who were struggling, to see what would come out of that. I used to have an educational assistant at King George Community School who would always pop in my classroom and say, you know, it's so calm in here. If you could just bottle this and sell it. And I was kind of like, you know, how do you bottle human and sell that? I didn't really know what it was that I had. So I kind of took that just to conversations with teachers who were struggling, from someone who was potentially thriving, and what could we build on from there. And so that's where I developed Calm Classrooms workshops. And basically we looked at all the human elements of teaching that potentially we're not taught or are not focused on, just kind of the relational aspects of the classroom and how important that is, and how much it can support students and the teacher in the space. And then that kind of led me to the direction I went for my PhD work, because I thought, you know, I can look at teacher burnout and teachers who are struggling, and it kind of is a so what, now what? We know that teachers are struggling, so what do we do about it? So in my PhD work, I wanted to look at teachers who are thriving. So that was the goal, to find teachers thriving in an era, even pre-pandemic, where we were saying mental health crisis. It's, you know, burnout crisis. And so that kind of led me to the PhD work and working with thriving teachers, so I could pull out, okay, so what can we learn from the thriving teachers and maybe turn that into something that's teachable? And that led to the human curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we had spoken last year, you quoted a 2019 study by the NDP that found like 40% of teachers in Saskatchewan said that they seriously considered leaving the profession at
Yeah.
some point in their careers. And I think, and probably now that would be even possibly higher, right? With the increased demands of what online teaching, everything that COVID has also brought to our classrooms.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So out of your PhD, so the Calm Classrooms, and then so you looked at early career teachers that were thriving
Yeah.
in your research, and what did you find there? What particular did you find?
So I will just pop this slide over here. I do have a frame for the human curriculum, which if you worked with me before, follow me online anywhere, I share it a lot. And this framework is really a culmination of everything I just talked about with respect to my background and experience in the classroom, my experience in mental health. However, it was doing the PhD work with these thriving teachers that gave me the language for what I was looking for, the meat of what would we bottle, if that's what, I'll never forget. Her name was Edna, that educational assistant who would always ask me that. And, what would it be that we would bottle? And so these thriving teachers that I worked with, the first thing I discovered was that because I went into it thinking they'd be thriving because they didn't have a lot of challenges. Oddly enough, they're just, things are going great. There's, they have pretty calm classrooms and things are going well. And what I learned from them is that they faced a ton of challenges and they were thriving in spite of those challenges. And that really gave me the meat of this human curriculum piece, which on the left-hand side, that content stuff, those 5M areas. And so these teachers had meaning and purpose that came to work with them every day. They were wholeheartedly, present in their work as teachers. Their mindset was growth oriented. You toss around language like look to the bright side and silver lining, but they really enveloped like, what do I have the power to change in this classroom? And what do I not have any power or control over? I'm going to focus on what I can do. And they would follow that path through their teaching. They had some mental health training, and that's kind of a small little piece sandwiched in the middle. Mental health is so much more, but they had some training. They'd either taken mental health first aid, which is like, what do we do in a crisis?
Okay.
Or they'd taken mental health literacy, which is really the language of what is anxiety, what is depression. Just give me the face of all of these disorders, diseases, disruptions that people can face in their life. So they had some of that.
Okay.
And or their own experiences with mental health, which I thought was really interesting as well. Like they'd either been through some trauma or faced some stress. And, that I really connected with in terms of my own life and my own experiences. And it always brought me back to like my very first day. I noticed there were a few teachers in here that said, I'm a brand new teacher heading into the classroom in the fall. I found myself in my very first classroom after graduating with my B.Ed from the U of S, having a panic attack with a group of students who would not listen to me. They would not sit down. And I was in full blown panic thinking, hey, I'm out of here. Like, where's the door? I'm walking away from this career. I literally can't handle this. I wasn't taught how to do this. And or how to calm myself down in a crisis of my own mind. So teachers had those pieces, which I think is really important. And then they also had the mentorship piece, which is twofold. They had great mentors, quality mentors, which I think is hugely important in our profession, that we can latch onto people who will take us under their wing and help us through our struggles. But they were also mentors themselves. They saw what they had to offer the profession, even though they were brand new teachers. So there's some level of confidence or knowledge that my experience matters and I can bring something to my colleagues, even though I'm new here. And I thought that was really interesting. And then the management piece also is kind of a holistic piece in that they had great classroom management, but going back to the story I just told, it was because they could manage themselves, manage their emotions, remain calm in the face of chaos, and use that energy to calm and manage the space. There were no gimmicks, there were no skittles, it was all relational. And so that core piece formed kind of the foundation of content that I thought, okay, this is teachable stuff. I can take this from, go ahead.
Yeah. I was thinking that was my next thought, is like, if someone joining us or listening to this in the future is like, well, I feel like might not have that, but yeah, so these are teachable. This is not just you either have it or you don't.
Yes. Yeah. It's teachable stuff. A lot of it, and we'll talk about it probably when we get to talking about some of the courses that I teach.
Yeah.
A lot of it is a walk or a journey that we have to take ourselves on. And that's what I try to do to support students. So some of it is stuff that can be told to us. But a lot of it is a journey we have to take ourselves on. And so that's the element I try to bring to the course. We learn these skills through, first of all, a relationship with ourselves and an application of various health-related strategies to ourselves to build up ourselves and have a good foundation, and then use that in connection with others and go from there. So there's some content pieces, and the whole idea, and that's where this aware, care, cope in the middle comes in, is that each of these content areas has an awareness piece. So that's like, if you're thinking back to Bloom's taxonomy of learning, there's like that knowledge, the thinking, cognitive piece. There's awareness pieces that, okay, I have to know this and have this background. Then there is the affective or the attitude development, where I understand enough that, and I care enough about the impact of this knowledge, that I'm applying it to myself and sharing it with others. And so that process comes next. And then the coping piece is using all of that to cope and manage with day-to-day stuff, because stress is never going to go away. Things are always going to be hard. We can spin around and get stuck on a lot of things, but until we pull away from that and use skills to cope and manage, then we'll remain stuck there. So that's kind of that process that students walk through content, through a journey that helps to build everything on the other side of this spectrum. So the capacity to build strength. And this was what I saw in these teachers also as themes. So they were resilient because of these 5 M's. They were able to build relationships first with self. We have to work on this relationship with me before I can be open and vulnerable and connect with others. They were resourceful. So when they didn't know what to do, they were problem solvers. They weren't problem focused. They were solution focused. So the problem, well, I don't know what to do, but there's resources here, 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 and here, and I can access them. And they had a general sense of the importance of routine to maintain wellness themselves, but also for their students. So there was predictability and consistency and all those things that we know help our students.
Right. And that if we don't see it we see it in our classrooms, definitely. And then also in ourselves, again, through COVID, right? Like without a routine, like what happened, it just, mental health just took a nosedive. And as a mom of like a 6 and a 9-year-old, I'm like, oh, routine. Like I need to have that kind of like a loose routine. And I think something about like the mentorship piece in particular, if you don't have that, like but it's the ability to seek it out, right? Whether it's an administrator, it could be a fellow teacher, it could be a colleague from your B.Ed. It could be, there's so many, it could be a retired teacher that's a friend. Like there's just so many pieces there for mentorship.
Find your people. That's the first thing you want to do, is find your people. And if they're not in your school, like you said, connect with friends, connect with family, your mentors that'll help guide you. Because it's hard. It's when we're caregivers, and we are as teachers, we take on a lot, and we need someone to hear us when we're struggling.
Yes, absolutely. And continue to seek that out. Particularly when you're struggling. The piece here that I really gravitate to, I think, is the therapeutic teaching, right? Because we do hear like, as a teacher, you can't be a therapist to your students, and there's processes, there's codes of conduct, there's special education, there's counselors in the school systems. But so often there might be like, I can't do anything, like I'm not the counselor here. But what you're talking about is that, like, and at the top there you have therapeutic teaching, like creating an environment for that. So,
Yeah, that's an essential piece of it, really. And I think it's what as teachers, it gives us hope to know that, because I know for sure that in the classroom there's a clear line between teacher and therapist. However, I know that things that need a therapeutic approach are happening in my classroom all the time. So
mhm.
in the middle, we have that therapeutic teaching. There are, and I could skip through to a slide where I have some elements
Yeah,
of
that would be great.
therapeutic teaching just to frame
Yeah.
this. These are just some of the pieces, but these are things that we've always done in our classrooms. You know, good quality, successful, thriving teachers do these things all the time, and they have their roots in therapy. And so what I do in the aware phase of a lot of my courses is touch on these elements that maybe we know about and maybe we don't, but they're therapeutic in nature. Therapists do them in their therapy office in addition to talk therapy or the other things
Mhm.
that they use, but we can do them as teachers. And that's where I started to see a real connection with all of this coming around my work, being an educator and a counselor, and seeing
Yeah.
how the two fit together quite nicely in certain ways. So, I'm not going to launch into in a classroom deep-seated advice for some specific issue or trauma. I'm going to go to my counselor to help me with that, my school counselor or social worker, or direct my student to the right supports. But upstream of that, teachers, we work in prevention. That's where our power is. And in the prevention realm, in the support realm, we can use a trauma-informed, compassion-informed, I call it human-informed, because the lens works for everybody. And we can get students outside. We can do a nature immersion therapy. We can do art therapy.
Mm.
Bibliotherapy is one that people don't think about too often, but how we can utilize fiction and nonfiction to help to understand the things that we carry with us and receive support. We can bring mindful-based stress reduction strategies to our classrooms. We see that in the Mind Up curriculum, an entire
Mhm.
curricula that's offered that teachers can use. So these are all CBT and DBT. I'll just speak to that really briefly because that's counselor talk, but that's cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, and behavior acquisition type therapy. Now, those are all big, fancy
Yeah.
garbage
Yeah.
words, but really they are cognitive and behavioral strategies that we can bring to our classroom and teach students ways to cope and manage with stress. First of all, one of the foundational pieces of this is understanding stress and being okay with it, inviting it to the table, and then
Mhm.
giving people tools to deal with it. I can learn tools to cope and manage with my stress. And I think a lot of young people especially think once they have stress, they go straight from stress to overwhelm. We need to broaden that gap because there's a lot we can put in there. So even
Okay.
if you're Googling teachers and CBT strategies, you can find lesson plans. People are doing it, and it's just about bringing awareness to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the movement play, that last
Yeah,
one
and that's
there.
just
Yeah.
getting away
Yeah,
from
movement and play, yeah.
only moving and playing in a phys ed class, moving and playing. So for example, Megan, you were talking about how you sounded like there was a party going on downstairs on the second
Yeah,
floor.
earlier today I popped into Judy's class just to try to catch her at her break, and I didn't know it was your class, but I heard like music. I was like, wow, this sounds like fun.
We
Yeah.
were doing a chapter from Bruce Perry's work on rebuilding relational connections and having deep conversations. And I just infused some movement activity, and we had some fun and some laughs. And
Mhm.
great teachers know this stuff, but I think what is important around this therapeutic teaching piece is that not just knowing that these things help, but knowing they have a huge impact in the support of our young people's mental health and well-being, and ours as teachers. So
Yeah.
don't hesitate to hold space for some of these things. It's not just playtime, it's not just fun and games, it's therapeutic for us as humans. We're meant to move and not sit. So
Yeah.
we need to, we can add these pieces. So yeah, there's just a awareness piece to all of that is infused in a lot of the work that I do.
Yeah. And what kind of how are you bringing this to teacher candidates here at the College of Education, like in some undergraduate courses?
Yeah, so a couple of ways. I do teach a health methods course, which I frame around the pedagogy or the approach or the methods that I use from the human curriculum, and I basically talk about how we can support health, and mental health being at the root of all of our health, because it has an impact on us physiologically, physically, mentally,
Yeah.
part of everything. So just first of all, how we can teach these things in health methods, but we only have 80 minutes of health in this province. So I talk about, when it comes to curriculum and time in the classroom, so I talk about, more importantly, how to make this part of who we are and what we do. So in my health methods classes, that's what it looks like. So health is what we teach, but it's more so who we are and what we do, in all areas, all subject areas.
Right.
So that's one place where I bring it in, to a small degree, because there's other things we need to cover in that methods course. But I have had the opportunity to teach a couple of 411s, which in our college are essentially courses built around the areas of expertise of the person teaching the course. So yeah, you could take a 411, and most people who sign up for one don't have a clue what it's going to be about. So I'm like, surprise, we're talking about mental health. I'll run away on day one. No, I'm just kidding. They never leave. They stay and they. So yeah, I do an entire course around the human curriculum, and the course follows the 3 modules of aware, care, cope. And we spend the majority of the course applying mental health strategies, these things, to ourselves and building up ourselves, creating the environment where we're vulnerable enough to say, yeah, I deal with this. I deal with this. I deal with this. I'm human, surprise. And so, and a big piece of it is we think we have to go as teacher into the classroom and teach like our students have mental health. No, we all have mental health, right?
Okay. Yeah.
This applies to me. I'm not just learning this so I can go and help the kid with anxiety and the kid with depression, the kid with bipolar, and no, these are all things that apply to me. What areas of my mental health, where do I struggle, whether I have a diagnosis or not? We create that environment in a 411 where we really get close and build relationships and become vulnerable in that space. So we can take that deep breath, let the air out of the balloon, and get into the nitty gritty of coping and managing and healing with our stuff. And that's where I think we build strength as teachers to head into the profession strong enough to face stress and know that stress comes in and we have to complete it. It's like a cycle, like the moon, the sun, the stars, the earth, the seasons, they're all cycles. So is stress. So if it just comes into us and finds a place to sit in our body, we're going to get back pain, we're going to get headaches, we're going to get stomach aches. How do we get it out? And we all know how we do that. We move, we play, we have fun, we do all these things. So in our 411, we see the results of that. We do a cumulative project where it's a deep dive into self. And then we say, okay, now as an educator who feels strong enough to unpack a few things and see the difference in my life when I attend to my needs, how can I now bring this through some resources to my students in my classroom? So that's at the undergraduate level, what we do.
Yeah. And what's the feedback been like? How are students' experiences in the course in general?
Overwhelmingly positive. Yeah. I would say, like, oftentimes I say in general scenarios with classes, it's like 80-20 when you get feedback, 80% good and 20% naysayers. They didn't like you, they didn't like the content or the experience. With the mental health pieces, I would say it's like 99-1. And, in every group, I have 1 or 2 pieces of feedback that, it wasn't for me. And that's fair. We're not in the time or space in our life to face certain things, or I didn't present it in the right way or whatever, but it's overwhelmingly positive. And in fact, by the end of the course, most students are saying, why isn't this mandatory? Why isn't it mandatory in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4? Why am I just learning this now that I'm, so it's
because it could probably help them as students. Well, it would, help throughout their entire degree.
And it is something, you kind of have to softly get students into on the 411, especially on that first day. I do an opening circle and we all kind of say, why are we here? What are we doing? And everyone's like, I'm ticking a box and I'm actually not sure because now it's about mental health and I don't know. I don't want to. And then I say, just give it a day or two. The next day I come back, I'm like, okay, nobody dropped the class. We're all still here. And by the end, they're overwhelmingly grateful that they had the experience.
That's great. And then for graduate students, you're offering a course, an 898, so a new course on this, right? But like not necessarily that 411 inquiry, but yeah, what's the shape of the graduate course going to look like?
Yeah, so that is very similar, only we're taking it a little bit further at the graduate level. First of all, I'm super excited to offer this for in-service teachers. We will follow the same module set of Aware, Care, Cope. A lot of it will be discussion-based. There'll be questions where I sort of launch people into discussion and thinking about these things. We certainly, there's research and literature and background that we're going to dive into at the graduate level around mental health in schools and classrooms. We'll unpack a little bit about that at the awareness stage. And then the main part of the graduate course is going to be what's called a heuristic self-study or self-inquiry. And that's where we're formalizing. So at the undergraduate level, we're not diving too deep into research beyond general inquiry. And inquiry is something we do in schools, and my 411 lens is turning that a little bit on yourself. But at the graduate level, we're going to look at it as a qualitative study of self and my experience of unpacking mental health. And so again, similar to the 411, I'll have to work to create that safe environment where we're comfortable with the topics, and then we will stage into that self-study, and the students will be offered nonfiction resources where they can look at applying mental health pieces to their own life. I'll invite them to engage in therapy if that's something they want to do. They can read, they can do art therapy, they can do just regular old therapy. I'm a huge proponent of therapy. I think we all can benefit from having, you know, a BFF that we can tell our deep, dark secrets to, and they're not going to tell anyone else, right? Yeah. They also have some skills to help us walk through hard things. I think, you know, if we have access to it, we should utilize it. But yeah, it'll be more of a focus on this qualitative self-study inquiry piece, but it'll be similar to what we do. We'll unpack more of the theoretical sort of pedagogical pieces of this type of therapeutic teaching. So there's attachment-based resources that we'll dive into. Nell Nodding's work, you know, care in classrooms, those kinds of things we'll unpack on more of a theoretical level. I'm just trying to think what else is part of that. But yeah, so essentially it's taking this 411 experiential piece and just looking at it from more of a theoretical heuristic lens.
Yeah, great. Yeah, because I think for educators, and we'll open it up to Q&A in a little bit here, is like how often so passionate coming into the profession and so passionate to get their classroom, to get into a school and start teaching. And then you go through those struggles or you go through burnout. There's so many demands on teachers. They just increase every year. And the supports seem to be feeling like they're dwindling. What message do you have for teachers about that are so passionate, and how can they, is there one key message you have?
Oh gosh, I have a lot. You know, what is really a big message that I give, or a mantra that I share, is self-care to care give. That's one of my
care.
You know, we don't want to be so self-focused that we can't see other, but it is essential that we apply self-care strategies that support our own health and mental health, so that we don't absorb vicariously the trauma and the stress that we face in our classrooms. We have to be on some level foundationally prepared for that. And really the only way to do that is for me to get to know me, for me to meet my needs and support my well-being, to be strong in that space. So it is self-care before care give, so that we're ready for that.
Yeah. And this slide that you brought up here, and I should just step back a second and say to those that joined us maybe a little bit late, this is getting recorded, and I will send it out to everyone. It's also living on our Facebook page if you wanted to go back and watch maybe a bit that you may have missed. So this slide that's up here right now, that's the graduate course that's coming in the fall.
Yeah, I thought I would just pull that up, and I forgot to pull it. when I was talking, just for anyone interested in what are the themes and topics, but, you know, obviously I wouldn't dive into all this, but it's got a humanistic foundation. So our learning outcomes are built around understanding those pieces of curriculum, pedagogy, that are rooted in the humanistic elements. There are some psychological pieces to that we pull in a little bit, even though it is a curriculum course. And then just unpacking what is therapeutic teaching in practice. What are the methods and strategies that we use? And then we do move into that whole entire care and cope pieces, applying it to self. And that's where we'll do that self-study, and some of those other pieces will come out as a result of that conversation and discussion around the topics. Yeah.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we head into some Q&A?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think the Q&A would bring out probably anything I could ramble on about anyway, and it'll what people maybe are more interested in hearing about. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll open it up to questions. You can pop them in the chat, or unmute yourself if you'd like to. We are streaming this as well on Facebook. Hello to everyone joining us on Facebook. So if you do take off your video, you will show up on the Facebook stream. So if you do just want to put your question in the chat and I can read it, or unmute or raise your hand maybe. Also on Facebook, I will kind of head over there and check if I have any questions coming up in a few seconds here. There's a bit of a delay, but and if I don't catch you right away, I will certainly watch for that. Yeah. And as this is an 898, so you'll offer it in the fall and then see how it goes and potentially offer it again and then just kind of see what the uptake is. Is there plans for other courses that you're going to be offering?
Yeah, currently there is not. So we will see, we'll gauge the interest, we'll gauge the experience of the students in the first go around and then carry on the conversation. Good. Yeah, so we have a couple coming in. From Marissa, what would be a few resources you would recommend for students or teachers? I guess that would probably be like students, like K-12 students. Okay. So if they could clarify, is it for teacher development or for students?
Sure, Marissa, if you want to clarify that, and then I'll come back to you. Raquel is asking if there's any chance of doing an online course. I think this one is in person in the fall, right? Is there any interest?
And I'm totally open to it. If we find that this course is well received and there are people who want to take it who are doing online master's programs or something, then I'm totally open to offering it online. I'd love to have that conversation with the powers that be. So I'm personally open to it. Definitely.
And it is offered through curriculum studies, but is asking if educational administration students can take it.
Yeah, so I believe Patty Gillies is the person that you may want to talk to from the U of S. However, I think that they keep it closed to eCur until the first week of August or just after the August long weekend. Then it opens up to anyone. So after August 2nd, 5th, whatever, in that time.
Yeah, so as students in other departments at the college, just watch for that to be able to register after that. So Marissa is clarifying that it's for resources. So what would be a few resources you would recommend for teacher development?
Okay.
Or for K-5.
Or for K-5?
Yeah.
Okay. For teacher development, hands down, the number one resource I would say that everyone has to read is Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey's book, What Happened to You? That's a resource that I now use as an anchor text in my 450 classes, and it looks at health and mental health from a trauma-informed lens. What I love about that book, and I've studied with Bruce Perry a few times over the years, taken courses with him in person and online, is that he brings what's called the neurosequential model in education, NME. If you Google Bruce Perry's work and the neurosequential model in education, he brings from therapeutics to education the lens that we can use in classrooms to support trauma-informed, compassion-informed care. And the great
Okay.
thing about that book in writing it with Oprah is that Oprah is a person who speaks openly about coming from a background with trauma, violence, and abuse.
Yeah.
And so her lens is he presents the scientific data and then she asks the hard questions or fills in the blanks around, yeah, I've experienced this, or this is how it looks in my life. And so I think you get a really good balance of both lenses. That book, if I was running a school, I would put it on the list for book study if we had a book group or something.
Yeah.
That's a great one. And then in terms of children's books, K-5, I'm going to say to those asking, send me an email on that first slide, or I'll bring it up again. You can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook through DM or through the email. I have a big long list of books that we can use to bring to the classroom around worries. There's a book called Worry No More. I'm just forgetting the names of the authors and the books, but I do have a great resource list for nonfiction books to help bring the conversation to young people. I've taught mental health related information to kids as young as 3. I've done some contract work with Montessori schools, and we've had these conversations with 3-year-olds. So there's ways to do this and frame the conversation of mental health. Dan Siegel is a great, I'm going to try not to go on super long here because I could go on forever. That's why I say email me. But Dan Siegel really quickly has this great hand model of the brain that he uses as a foundational aspect and a teaching tool. Okay. And that's something I use with little kids all the time. So it's like our hand fits with our, it's easily, of course, our brains are probably that big, right? But this is a little handy model. But what I think is cool about how he frames this is that he shows us that our fight, flight, freeze, our triggering emotions live in our amygdala, which is in the center of our brain. Yeah. And up here is our thinking part of our brain. And his model shows us that when we're triggered, when we're in fight, flight, or freeze, something happens, that we go offline and we can't think when we're in fight, flight, or freeze. It's so important for kids and adults to understand that, we want to be able to regulate our emotions so that we can think through things, but we can't be expected to do that when we're triggered and offline. And so Dan Siegel has some great resources for that. And I'm going to take a second to plug Beverly Brenna's work, our recently retired professor, because I use Bev's books in my health classes because she writes great fiction content and addresses hard things like suicide and various mental health issues and concerns from a young person's perspective. Her books can be used in, the 3 to 8 grade range. And they're great ways to externalize that conversation. You can have the conversation, but I don't have to talk about me. I can talk about the character in this book. So
yeah, and Bev, for those that may not know, just recently retired. She just retired July 1st. So Professor Emerita, author, ELA, just amazing human being. And yes, she has incredible resources. I've put her website in the chat. And also and she has, you can get her books from the from the Education and Music Library. Possibly through Saskatoon Public Schools. She used to work there as well. So yeah, they are available to be lent out through Education and Music Library. And she also just finished a study on Canadian literature, 1,000 Canadian children's books, and an analysis of those. And she donated all those books, 1,000 of them, to the Education and Music Library. So those are available. There's one to take, you can lend, you can take it out, and then also there's one on file or reserve all the time. So yeah, there's a lot of resources available even through the university library too. And she does have the teacher resources for each of her books on her website too. So yeah, phenomenal author.
Yes.
Yeah, and researcher.
Yeah.
Let me just
bibliotherapy at its best. Yeah.
Is there anything else? I'm not seeing anything come up on the Facebook Live feed. There's a few that are saying they'd definitely be interested in an online course. Thank you for the resources.
I am, if I'm allowed to talk about my private business side, I
Yeah.
could mention a couple of things I'm doing
Yeah.
there.
And that's Prairie Sky
Yeah.
Education, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I do
Yes,
have a
please do.
practice where I used to do counseling. I did counseling right up until COVID hit, and then I transitioned my clients, who are mostly young people and families, online, and then wrapped up. Once those clients finished, I no longer took on new clients for counseling. However, I still do coaching and consulting through Prairie Sky Education. And so, yeah, the Instagram and Facebook is there. But this fall, I've had several people ask about doing a mentorship group. And I would run a mentorship group for teachers that would look similar. It wouldn't be exactly the same, but it'd be similar to the themes and topics. It would follow an aware, care, cope, and a self-study process.
Yeah.
So if anyone is not, taking a class right now or not yet a part of the college, that you can reach me there and we can chat about that.
Okay, great. No, that's excellent to know. And that's via your website or Facebook or social media?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just reach out to me on any of those platforms, and that would be online. That one is on Zoom.
Yeah.
So you can have I have a few teachers from Alberta and up north who follow me, and they're particularly looking for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Great. Let's check the chat some more. Yeah, it's just so excellent to talk with you and to do it in a different format. We thought we'd try this instead of just an interview and then write a story. I think it's impactful, and we've definitely had the uptake here. So I thank everyone for joining us on Zoom and also on Facebook. Yeah, if there's any other questions, just pop them in the chat. I'll watch for them. But I think we'll wind it down now. I'm sure everyone is eager to hopefully get off the call and relax. And if you're on vacation,
summer day.
enjoy your summer holiday. All teachers greatly deserve their summer holiday. Yeah, just thanks for coming in. Thank you, Judy. Thanks for joining us. There will be the recording on Facebook. You can watch it again. And also, I think I will send it out to everyone that registered for the webinar on Eventbrite. If you want to give us feedback on how it went too, you can just email me back once I send out that recording. We're curious about how this if this meets kind of the needs of our alumni, of our students. Yeah, so as we just wrap up here, thank you so much, Judy. This was great. I don't think this will be the last that we do. We may as well. Yeah, I think we can keep this up and have a continued conversation about this topic, because it's so crucial to our educators and to the profession.
For sure.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. For those that may have just joined us, we are finishing up here, but I do have the recording and I will send it out. It's also available on Facebook Live if you want to hop over there. Okay, thank you, everyone. Yeah, everyone's saying thanks so much on Facebook. Thanks for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Day off.
Yeah, enjoy. Okay, bye.
Bye.